Hello, everyone. Good to see you, and hope you enjoy the new story. Subscribe and like the story. It started with a sound so small, I almost ignored it. The faint buzz of Emily's phone vibrating on her nightstand. The glow of the screen was faint in the dark room, but it was enough to pull me out of a restless sleep. I rolled onto my side, trying to shake the nagging unease creeping into my chest. The clock on my nightstand read 1:13 a.m. Emily was asleep beside me, her breathing steady, one arm curled under her pillow. I closed my eyes, willing myself to fall back asleep, but then her phone buzzed again. I don't know why I looked. Maybe it was the timing, or maybe it was something deeper, some instinct I didn't fully understand. Her phone lit up once more, and I saw the name on the screen, Evan. I frowned. I didn't know any Evan, and as far as I knew, neither did Emily. But it wasn't the name that hit me. It was the message. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. For a moment, I stared at the screen, the words not fully registering. My mind scrambled for explanations. It had to be a misunderstanding, a message meant for someone else, maybe, but my gut told me otherwise. I glanced at Emily, still sound asleep, her face relaxed and peaceful. My chest tightened. Before I could stop myself, I reached for her phone. My fingers hesitated over the screen, guilt creeping in. We'd always respected each other's privacy. But this wasn't about privacy anymore. I unlocked the phone. Her passcode was still our anniversary, and opened the message thread with Evan. What I found made my stomach drop. The conversation stretched back weeks. At first, the messages seemed harmless, jokes about work, complaints about their boss, but then they shifted. Late-night messages, dinner plans, flirty exchanges that grew more intimate with every reply. You looked amazing tonight. Your trouble, you know that? When can I see you again? I sat frozen, scrolling through the messages. Each word felt like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just some harmless flirtation. This was something deeper, something I'd never imagined Emily was capable of. I thought about the past few months, the late nights, the sudden work dinners, the way she'd been dressing up more than usual. I told myself it was just the stress of her new job, but now I saw it for what it was. The signs had been there all along, and I'd been too blind to see them. Beside me, Emily stirred in her sleep. My heart pounded as I locked her phone and set it back on the nightstand. She mumbled something incoherent and rolled over, completely unaware that her world, our world, was crumbling around us. I couldn't stay in bed. My chest felt tight, my thoughts racing in every direction. I slipped out of the covers and walked to the kitchen, leaning against the counter as I tried to make sense of what I'd just seen. The house was silent, but my mind was deafening. I replayed the messages over and over, the words searing themselves into my memory. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation, but the truth was staring me in the face. An hour passed, then two. I couldn't bring myself to go back to bed. When Emily finally walked into the kitchen around sunrise, she looked at me with a sleepy smile, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. "Morning," she said, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. I couldn't bring myself to return the smile. "Morning." She poured herself a cup of coffee, scrolling through her phone as if everything was normal. I watched her carefully, searching for some sign of guilt, but her face was calm. My stomach churned. How could she act so normal, so casual, when she was hiding something like this? "You okay?" she asked, glancing at me over the rim of her mug. "Yeah," I said, forcing a tight smile. "Didn't sleep well." She nodded, her attention already back on her phone. I couldn't help but wonder if she was texting him right now, if their conversation was continuing in real time while I stood just feet away. The thought was unbearable. I pushed back my chair and stood. "I'm going out for a bit," I said, grabbing my keys. Emily looked up, her brow furrowing slightly. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, elite. Just need some air." She didn't press the issue, and that hurt more than it should have. As I walked out the door and climbed into my car, a hollow ache settled in my chest. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. The sun was barely up when I returned home. I'd spent the past few hours driving aimlessly, the road stretching out like a maze with no exit. My thoughts were a tangled mess of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. By the time I walked back into the house, I felt numb. Emily was still in the kitchen, dressed now in her usual work-from-home attire, leggings and an oversized sweater. She looked up when I entered, her brow furrowing as she set her coffee down. "Where'd you go?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. I dropped my keys onto the counter with a clatter, the sound louder than I intended. Needed to clear my head. She tilted her head slightly, her expression shifting into concern. "Is something wrong?" I almost laughed at the question. Wrong? Everything was wrong. The woman I'd built my life with, the woman I trusted more than anyone, had been texting another man, Evan, with messages so intimate they made my stomach turn. "Who's Evan?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a moment, Emily froze, her eyes widening in surprise, or maybe guilt. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she reached for her coffee, her fingers trembling slightly as she brought the mug to her lips. "I asked you a question," I said, stepping closer. "Who is he?" Her hand faltered, and she set the mug down with a soft thud. "Adam, it's not what you think," she said finally, her voice trembling. I folded my arms, my chest tightening. "Then tell me what it is." She hesitated, her gaze darting to the side as if searching for an escape route. "He's just someone from work," she said. "A coworker." "A coworker." I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "Do all your coworkers text you things like, 'Last night was incredible'? Because if that's a new trend, I missed the memo." Her face flushed, and she reached out as if to touch my arm, but I pulled away. "Adam, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I can explain." "Then explain," I snapped. She pressed her hands to her temples, her breathing quickening. "It wasn't supposed to mean anything," she said finally. "It just happened." "It just happened?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're telling me you accidentally started an emotional affair with some guy from work? Because that's what this is, isn't it?" She flinched at the word affair, and I saw tears pooling in her eyes. "We didn't. Nothing physical happened," she said quickly, her voice desperate. "I swear. It was just talking." "Talking," I said bitterly. "So what?" "He just says the right things, and you couldn't resist." Emily's tears spilled over, and she buried her face in her hands. "I felt invisible, Adam," she sobbed. "You're always at work or busy with something else. I needed someone to talk to, and he was there." Her words hit me like a slap. Invisible. The same excuse, the same justification I'd read in countless stories of betrayal. It felt hollow, rehearsed, like something she convinced herself was true to ease her guilt. I stared at her, my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "You felt invisible, so you decided to betray me?" "It wasn't like that," she said, shaking her head. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't even realize how far it had gone until it was too late." "Too late," I said quietly, the words heavy in my chest. "You mean too late for you to stop? Or too late for me to find out?" She didn't answer. The silence between us was deafening, broken only by her quiet sobs. I wanted to keep yelling, to demand more answers, but a part of me was too exhausted to fight. I turned away, gripping the edge of the counter as I tried to steady myself. "I need to know everything," I said finally, my voice low but firm. "Every message, every conversation, every detail. If you want even the slightest chance of fixing this, you need to tell me the truth." Emily nodded, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her sweater. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll tell you everything." For the next hour, she unraveled the story piece by piece. How Evan had started out as just a friendly coworker, someone she could vent to about work. How their conversations had slowly become more personal, more intimate. How she'd felt a spark with him that she hadn't felt in a long time. "It was stupid," she said, her voice trembling. "I got caught up in the attention, the excitement. But it didn't mean anything, Adam. I swear." "It didn't mean anything?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because it sure as hell means something to me." She broke down again, her sobs echoing through the kitchen, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Instead, I stood there, staring at the floor, my chest heaving with every breath. When she finally stopped crying, I looked up at her, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said. Not now. Maybe not ever. Her lip quivered, and she nodded. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, she said quietly. Just tell me what to do. I didn't have an answer for her. The truth was, I didn't know if there was anything she could do to fix this. The trust between us was shattered, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be rebuilt. I need time, I said finally, my voice hollow. I need space to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do next. Emily nodded again, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her guilt. Take all the time you need, she said softly. I walked out of the kitchen without another word, leaving her alone with her remorse. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, one thought played over and over in my mind. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had betrayed me, and nothing would ever be the same. I left the house without saying a word, the echo of Emily's sobs still ringing in my ears. My chest felt tight, like a band was slowly constricting around it. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not after everything she'd said, everything she'd done. The cold morning air stung my face as I stepped outside, the frost clinging to the edges of the lawn. I climbed into the car and started driving, aimlessly at first. The streets were quiet, the early hour leaving the world in a strange stillness. My thoughts weren't quiet, though. They spun and twisted, replaying her words and the messages I'd seen. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I felt invisible. We didn't do anything, just talking. Her excuses felt hollow, but the way she cried, the way she pleaded, it didn't feel fake. That was the worst part. I didn't know what was real anymore. I ended up at a diner on the edge of town, one of those places that hadn't changed in decades. The kind with vinyl booths and menus laminated so long ago the edges had turned yellow. It was familiar, comforting in a way that I desperately needed. Sliding into a booth, I ordered a coffee and stared out the window at the empty parking lot. The waitress brought my drink quickly, giving me a curious look. I must have looked rough, disheveled, dark circles under my eyes, and still in yesterday's clothes. Rough morning? She asked with a polite smile. You could say that, I muttered. She nodded, sensing I wasn't in the mood to talk, and walked away. I took a sip of the coffee, its bitterness cutting through the fog in my head. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. How had we gotten here? Was there any way back? And who the hell was Evan? The more I thought about him, the angrier I got. I didn't even know what he looked like, but I hated him. Hated that he'd wiggled his way into Emily's life, into her thoughts. And I hated myself for not noticing sooner, for letting it happen. Had I been so wrapped up in work that I'd ignored her needs? Or was she just looking for something that didn't exist anymore? I wanted to blame her, to put it all on her shoulders, but a small voice in the back of my head whispered that I wasn't innocent either. After a while, I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts without really thinking. Most of the names felt irrelevant. Coworkers, old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Then I saw one that gave me pause. Emma. Emma had been my closest friend for years, long before I met Emily. We'd grown up together, stayed in touch through college, and only drifted apart after I got married. She'd always been a safe place, someone who listened without judgment. Without giving myself time to second-guess, I tapped her name. She picked up on the second ring. Adam? Wow, it's been a while. What's up? I hesitated, suddenly unsure of what to say. Hey, Emma. Yeah, it has. Sorry for calling out of the blue. It's fine, she said warmly. What's going on? The words spilled out before I could stop them. I told her everything, about Emily, about the messages, about the confrontation. I didn't hold anything back, and by the time I finished, my chest felt lighter, though my throat was raw. Emma was quiet for a moment, then said softly, Adam, I'm so sorry. That's a lot. Yeah, I said, running a hand through my hair. It's a mess. You don't have to figure it all out right now, she said. Take it one step at a time. Right now, you just need to breathe. Her words were simple, but they hit me hard. She was right. I didn't need to solve everything today. I just needed to find my footing again. Thanks, Emma, I said. I really needed that. Anytime, she replied. And if you need to talk again, you know where to find me. When I hung up, I felt a little steadier. Not fixed, not whole, but like I wasn't completely drowning anymore. Emma hadn't given me answers, but she'd reminded me that I wasn't alone. that I didn't have to carry this weight all by myself. I sat in the booth for a while longer, finishing my coffee as the diner filled with the hum of early risers and truckers. The world was waking up around me, but my own felt frozen in place. Eventually, I stood, left a tip on the table, and walked back to my car. I still didn't know what I was going to do about Emily, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep running forever. For now, I started the engine and headed home, the question looming in my mind. What happens next? I didn't know what to expect when I walked back into the house. I'd spent hours driving, hoping to clear my head, but if anything, the storm in my mind only got worse. By the time I opened the door, I was no closer to knowing what to say or do. Emily was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest, staring at the muted TV. She looked up as I entered, her face pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "You're back," she said softly, her voice tentative, like she wasn't sure if I wanted to hear it. I tossed my keys onto the counter without answering. My chest was tight, and the words I needed to say felt tangled in my throat. "Adam," she started, standing up from the couch, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Not yet," I said. My voice came out harder than I intended, but I didn't care. "You want to fix this? Then start by telling me the truth. Everything. No more half answers. No more lies." She hesitated, her hands twisting together as she sat back down. "Okay," she said after a moment. "I'll tell you everything." I stayed standing, arms crossed, as she began to speak. Emily started at the beginning, her voice trembling as she unraveled the story. Evan had been a coworker, someone new to her team. He was funny, charming, and easy to talk to, a stark contrast to the tension she felt at home. "It wasn't supposed to be anything," she said, her gaze fixed on her lap. "He'd make jokes, and I'd laugh because it felt good to laugh again. It felt easy." Her words stung, but I kept silent, letting her continue. "It started small," she went on. "Just work stuff. Then he started texting me after hours. At first, it was casual, jokes, questions about projects, but then he started asking about me. My day. My life. And you answered," I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. She flinched. "Yes, I shouldn't have, but I did. And before I knew it, it felt like he understood me in a way I didn't even realize I needed." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. "And then what? How did it go from texting to—" I stopped, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. "To whatever this is?" Emily wiped at her face, tears streaking her cheeks. "One night, after a work dinner, he kissed me. I didn't stop him right away, and I hated myself for it. I told him it was a mistake, that it couldn't happen again. But after that, things changed." "Changed how?" I pressed, my voice tight. "He kept texting," she admitted. "He'd say he missed talking to me, that he couldn't stop thinking about me. And I didn't know how to end it. I thought if I ignored it, he'd get the hint, but he didn't." Her words hung in the air like a weight pressing down on me. "You could have told me," I said, my voice low but sharp. "You could have said something. But instead, you hid it. You let it keep going." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I was scared, Adam. I didn't want to lose you." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "You didn't want to lose me, so you lied to my face? Do you even hear yourself right now?" Emily sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I know I messed up," she choked out. "I hate myself for it, but I didn't know what to do. I felt invisible, Adam, like you didn't see me anymore." Her words hit harder than I expected. A part of me wanted to dismiss them as another excuse, another deflection. But deep down, I knew there was some truth in what she was saying. We hadn't been the same in a long time. The late nights at work, the silence between us that stretched longer with each passing day. It had all added up, even if I hadn't seen it. But that didn't make this okay. I read the texts. I said finally, my voice breaking the silence. Emily's head snapped up, her face crumpling. "All of them," I continued. "I saw everything. The flirting, the compliments, the plans. You didn't just make one mistake, Emily. You made 100 little choices that led to this." Her sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking as she tried to apologize. "I'm so sorry, Adam. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear I didn't mean—" "Stop," I said sharply, my voice cutting through her tears. I don't want to hear how you didn't mean for this to happen. You made your choices. You decided to let him into our life, into your life, and now I have to live with it. Emily nodded, wiping at her face. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, she said quietly. I'll block him, I'll quit my job, anything. Just tell me what to do. I stared at her, my chest tight with anger and heartbreak. I don't know if there's anything you can do, I said honestly. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. Her lip quivered, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Please, she whispered, don't give up on us. I love you, Adam. I know I messed up, but I love you. Her words didn't have the impact I thought they would. I wanted to feel something. Anger, sadness, hope, but all I felt was numb. I need time, I said finally, standing up. I can't make any decisions right now. I just need time. Emily nodded, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her guilt. Take all the time you need, she said. I walked out of the room without another word, retreating to the bedroom and closing the door behind me. As I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, one thought played over and over in my mind. I'd asked for the truth, and now I had it. But knowing the truth didn't make it any easier to bear. The days after our confrontation were heavy with silence. Emily moved around the house cautiously, like she was afraid any sudden movement might set me off. I avoided her as much as I could, throwing myself into work and staying late to avoid coming home. But no matter how busy I kept myself, I couldn't escape the constant replay of her confession in my mind. He kissed me. I didn't stop him right away. I felt invisible. It was a mistake. The words circled in my head, each one cutting deeper than the last. About a week later, Emily stopped me as I came through the door. She was standing in the kitchen, holding a small stack of papers in her hands. Adam, she said quietly, her voice trembling. Can we talk? I hesitated, still clutching my keys. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear whatever she had to say, but something in her expression, the desperation, maybe, made me stay. Okay, I said, setting my keys on the counter. She gestured to the table where I saw the papers. Brochures for couples therapy, lists of services, phone numbers. I've been looking into counseling, she said. For us. I stared at the stack. She'd obviously put thought into this, but it didn't feel like enough. And you think therapy is going to fix this? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Her shoulders slumped, but she met my gaze. I don't know, she admitted. But I want to try. I need to try. I need to know if you're willing to try too. I sighed, the weight of her words pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to say no, to tell her it was too late. But another part, the part that still remembered the life we'd built, couldn't let go. Fine, I said finally. I'll go. But I'm not making any promises. Our first session was awkward. Dr. Hayes, the therapist, welcomed us with a warm smile and asked why we were there. Emily went first, her voice shaking as she described the affair. She talked about how distant we'd grown, how she'd felt neglected. It doesn't excuse what I did, she said, tears streaming down her face. But I want to understand how we got here. I want to fix it. When it was my turn, the words came out raw and bitter. I feel betrayed, I said. Like I don't even know who she is anymore. And I don't know if I can ever trust her again. Dr. Hayes nodded, her voice calm. Trust takes time to rebuild, she said. But the fact that you're both here shows that you're willing to try. That's an important first step. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but I kept going to the sessions. Therapy forced us to confront things we'd been ignoring for years. Emily admitted to feeling isolated, saying my long hours at work made her feel like I wasn't there even when I was home. It's not your fault, she said in one session. I made my own choices. But I should have told you how I was feeling instead of letting it fester. Her honesty stung, but it also made me think about my role and what had happened. I'd been so focused on work, on providing, that I'd stopped being present. Still, understanding her reasons didn't make forgiveness easier. At home, Emily tried to show me she was serious about fixing things. She blocked Evan, handed me her phone passwords, and started checking in constantly. But transparency wasn't the same as trust. Every time her phone buzzed, every time she left the house, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. One night, After a particularly hard session, Emily sat down next to me on the couch. "Adam," she said softly, "I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. And I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But I need to know, is there still a chance for us?" I looked at her, my chest tightening. For the first time in weeks, I saw the woman I fell in love with. The one who, despite everything, still held a piece of my heart. "I don't know," I admitted honestly, "but I'm willing to keep trying. For now." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached for my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze her hand either. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The weight of her betrayal was still there, but beneath it, a fragile flicker of hope remained. For the first time, I thought maybe we had a chance. Weeks turned into months. Therapy became a routine, a space where we could air the worst parts of ourselves and try to make sense of them. Dr. Hayes was unflinchingly honest, challenging us to dig deeper into the cracks in our relationship. Each session felt like peeling back another layer of an old wound, painful but necessary. Emily threw herself into the process. She didn't just attend therapy, she lived it. Every week, she reflected on what we discussed, asking hard questions and owning up to her mistakes. She kept her phone unlocked and visible, not just for me, but as a gesture of transparency. She didn't go out alone anymore, not even to the store. She wanted to rebuild trust, and she wanted me to see it. But trust wasn't something you could fast-track. It wasn't something I could force myself to feel, no matter how hard I tried. One day, after a particularly quiet dinner, Emily put down her fork and looked at me across the table. "Do you hate me?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but the weight behind the words was enormous. The question caught me off guard. Hate her? The woman I had spent nearly a decade building a life with? I wasn't sure. "No," I said after a long pause. "I don't hate you, but I don't know how to stop feeling hurt, or betrayed, or angry." Her eyes glistened with tears, but she nodded, as if she'd expected the answer. "I just needed to know," she whispered. I sighed, setting my fork down. "Emily, I don't want to hate you. I don't want to feel this way at all. But it's like, I can't look at you without thinking about him, without wondering why you weren't happy with me." Her lip quivered, but she didn't look away. "It wasn't about not being happy with you," she said. "It was about not being happy with myself. And instead of dealing with that, I looked for an escape. I took the easy way out. And it was wrong." Her words hung in the air, heavy but honest. Dr. Hayes had warned us about this phase. The limbo where everything feels stagnant. "You'll question whether it's worth it," she'd said. "You'll wonder if you're making progress at all. That's when you have to dig the deepest." It felt like we were there, stuck in that in-between space where neither of us knew what came next. Then one evening, Emily suggested something unexpected. "What if we got away for a while?" she asked. We were sitting on the couch, the tension between us a quiet, invisible force. Just the two of us. No therapy, no work, no distractions. Just time to breathe. I raised an eyebrow. "And you think a weekend away is going to fix everything?" "No," she said quickly. "I don't think it'll fix anything. But maybe it'll remind us why we're still trying." Her words stayed with me, and by the end of the week, I agreed. A weekend at a lakeside cabin we used to love seemed worth a shot. The cabin was quiet, nestled in a pocket of woods that felt far removed from the rest of the world. We spent the first day in near silence, unpacking and settling in without saying much. By the second evening, the tension started to ease. We went hiking during the day, walking a familiar trail that wound around the lake. It was the same path we'd taken years ago, back when everything felt simpler. Emily laughed when she nearly tripped on a root, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled a real, unforced smile. That night, as we sat by the fire, Emily broke the silence. "Do you ever think about when we first got together?" she asked, her voice quiet. "All the time," I admitted. "We were different then. We were lighter." She nodded, staring into the flames. "I miss that. I miss us." "So do I said, surprising myself with the honesty. The cabin didn't fix everything, but it gave us a chance to remember why we were fighting for this in the first place. It reminded me of the good times, of the woman I'd fallen in love with before life and stress and betrayal got in the way. When we returned home, things felt different. Not perfect, but better. We were talking more, not just about the hard stuff, but about the small things we used to share. Slowly, the walls between us started to come down. One night, after dinner, Emily sat down next to me on the couch and took my hand. Her touch was tentative, like she wasn't sure if it was okay. "I love you," she said softly. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I love you. And I'm not giving up on us." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, her face etched with guilt and hope and so much vulnerability it almost hurt to see. "I love you too," I said finally. The words felt fragile but real. Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in months, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. A year ago, if you'd asked me what love looked like, I would have given you the version I thought I lived: steadfast, secure, unshakable. I would have said love was a foundation, something you could build a life on without worrying it might crumble. But after everything Emily and I have been through, I know better. Love isn't unshakable. It bends, it cracks, and sometimes it breaks. The real test is whether you're willing to piece it back together, knowing it will never look the same. It's been 8 months since Emily told me the truth, since the night my life split into a before and after. Some days, the memories feel like ghosts haunting the edges of my thoughts. Evan's name, the messages, her confession. But those ghosts have faded over time, their presence less overwhelming now. We've worked hard to get here. Therapy helped, though it didn't fix us. It gave us the tools to understand each other, to rebuild what we'd lost. Dr. Hayes told us early on that recovery wouldn't be linear, and she was right. Progress came in fits and starts, with setbacks that sometimes felt crushing. But we kept showing up, week after week, even on the days we didn't want to. Emily has been relentless in her efforts to earn back my trust. She cut all ties to Evan immediately, blocked him on every platform, and even switched teams at work to ensure they'd never cross paths again. She keeps her phone unlocked and visible, and she checks in with me often, not in a way that feels overbearing, but to show me she's being transparent. But trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. It's a choice I have to make every day, to believe her words, her actions, her commitment to us. Some days, it's easier than others. I still have moments where doubt creeps in. A random text notification or a passing comment about work can send my mind spiraling back to the betrayal. But I've learned to talk to her about it instead of letting it fester. And to her credit, Emily doesn't shy away from those conversations, no matter how uncomfortable they are. One of the hardest parts of this journey has been confronting my own role in what happened. Therapy forced me to look at myself, to see the ways I'd withdrawn into work, how I'd let the small cracks in our marriage go unnoticed. I used to think providing for Emily meant giving her a comfortable life, but I'd forgotten the part where I needed to be present. "I never stopped loving you," she told me once during a session, tears streaming down her face. "I just felt invisible, like you didn't see me anymore." Those words gutted me because I knew there was truth in them. I'd been so focused on building a life for us that I'd stopped living it with her. But knowing where we went wrong doesn't erase the pain of what she did. It doesn't undo the betrayal. What it does do, though, is give me a reason to keep trying. Not everything about us feels heavy anymore. There are good days now, moments where I catch a glimpse of the life we used to have. The way Emily laughs at something ridiculous. The way she hums to herself when she's cooking. We've started making time for each other again, whether it's cooking dinner together, going for walks, or just sitting on the porch with a couple of beers, talking about nothing and everything. It's not perfect. It never will be. But those moments remind me why I'm still here. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Emily turned to me. "Do you ever think about us before all this happened?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "All the time." "Do you miss it?" I thought about that for a moment. "I miss parts of it," I said honestly. "But I think what we're building now, it's stronger." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I never thought I'd get a second chance with you. I don't deserve it, but I'm so grateful for it." Her words caught me off guard, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I reached for her hand, lacing my fingers through hers. "We're both getting a second chance," I said, "and I'm grateful for that too. The scars of what happened will always be there. etched into the fabric of our relationship. But scars don't mean the wound hasn't healed. They're reminders of where we've been, of what we've survived. Emily and I aren't the same people we were before. This experience changed us, reshaped us, forced us to confront parts of ourselves we didn't want to see. But through it all, we've chosen each other. Every morning, I wake up and make that choice again. Because love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about what happens after the mistakes, about choosing to stay and fight, even when it feels impossible. So yes, our marriage isn't perfect. It never will be. But it's real, and it's ours. And for me, that's enough.